And we're now joined by Mark Lund, who is McCann Worldgroup UK CEO. It's a pleasure catching up with you here in beautiful Cannes. We've got the new reality of a hung parliament in the UK. You focus very much on the UK business. We don't know whether this means softer or harder Brexit. I guess for your client that means a lot more uncertainty, or not?
Yeah, I think it's been a year of uncertainty. You know, two referendums, two general elections in the last 2 years, none of them producing the results that were quite expected. But it's interesting because, you know, we do quite a lot of research into the UK consumer. We just released a new one called The Truth About Britain. And what we're finding is that although that uncertainty is a kind of day-to-day reality, the fact is that underneath it, there's a great deal of resilience and there's a great deal of positivity in the British consumer, and a great deal of faith, you know, in the institutions of Britain, even if they're not very enamoured of the current crop of politicians.
Are your clients generally more cautious when it comes to campaigns, when it comes to things, when it comes to the experimentation, the creativity that they want to explore with you?
No, I think we're seeing a degree of caution about second half of the year and leading into first half of 2018 generally. But the demand is to be more creative, to use more channels in a more integrated way, and that's what our clients expect from us.
So multi-channel, the rise of digital, that has nothing to do with politics. You think that will just steam ahead regardless of what happens?
Yeah, I mean it's what we're sort of describing as the 3 Ds, which is kind of data, diversity, and drawing together. And data's obvious, I mean it's kind of everywhere now. I think the industry tried to ignore it for a little while, but we're now kind of embracing it full on. And we're using it as a tool. We have much better data than we've ever had before, and that's a fuel for creativity. And I think diversity goes without saying. The more creative you want to be as an organization, the more diverse you have to be in terms of both your kind of culture and your reference points and the people that you work with and employ. And the drawing together, that's about sort of the fact that it's very hard now to say, is it advertising, is it PR, is it an event? And the great success that we've had in this Cannes is Fearless Girl, and it's impossible to know whether that's art or whether it's commerce, whether it's an event, whether it's PR. It's just captured the imagination of the world, and it's been very successful and a brilliant commercial as well as artistic success. So, that I think is a kind of brilliant example of where the lines all blur, but something great happens.
Mark, I want to come back to data, and I've heard so much about VR, AI, about programmatic here in Cannes. I just wonder, are we losing sight of what the consumer really wants? Are we just getting too caught up with the technology that drives the advertisers, the marketers forward?
Well, I think we have to kind of be very cognizant of the technology. But if you look at how many decisions does the average consumer make a day? Probably 2,000, we think, which is more than one a minute. And under those circumstances, you make your decisions fundamentally with your emotions, because it's the only way you can act fast enough. So I think what we're still really about is creating emotional connections between brands and consumers, and that requires as much EQ as IQ and as much kind of sensitivity as data. So we'll use data as a tool, but we'll never, I think, lose sight of the fact that ultimately we're about creating links between humans and brands.
Mark, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Still watching? Perfect. Click here to watch another great video from CNBC International. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.